Hi, I'm Harvey Blankfeld, host of Las Vegas Real Estate Now and principal of the Blankfeld Group at Berkshire Hathaway Home Services. We have prepared this video for you so you can better understand the documents we use here in Southern Nevada. And while we don't review every section of the document, we do try to clear up some of the most relevant concerns. We are recording this video in 2025, and if you're watching it long after that, know that there are likely changes that have taken place with this document, and this video may have some parts that are outdated. Also know that we operate here in Southern Nevada, and these forms are specific to our market. While you may be able to glean some value from this video, please know that no two markets operate exactly alike. And finally, I need you to know that I'm not an attorney, and none of what I'm explaining should be interpreted as legal advice. Okay, let's get started. The Las Vegas Realtors Residential Lease Agreement. This is a document provided to us by our local board for us to conduct rentals with. It's a 14-page document. I remember when I first started, it was like 6 pages, I think. All the additions to this agreement were made as a result of somebody suing somebody over something or making sure that things were right. So there's a lot of details in this. I'm going to go over what I consider to be the most important parts. So, okay, let's get started. Starting with the address of the property is up top here, and it's also mentioned right here in the premises, 7475 Sahara. In the premises, it's also noted that there's a mailbox, a parking space. If there was a storage unit or anything else, that would be noted here too. Up top is the date that you're executing this agreement between the tenant and the landlord. Here's the names of the homeowners. Here's the names of the tenants. The term of this lease is starting on January 27th of 2023 and ending on January 31st of 2024. So it's just slightly over a year. The total amount due throughout the term of this lease is $24,333.33. The rent per month is $2,000. It is to be paid through the property management portal or delivered to their address on or before the first of the month. Now we have a summary of the initial charges. Here you see the rent for the first month. The total that's due is in this column. The amount that's already been received by the property manager or the homeowner is in this column. And then the balance due is in this third column. So before the tenant moves in, they need to come up with this figure here in order to be able to move in. And it includes a variety of things, including deposits and fees. Now, the difference between a deposit and a fee is very important. See these words non-refundable? Fees are non-refundable. So if you pay a fee, if you pay a pet cleaning fee or you pay a cleaning fee, that means that the landlord is not expecting you to leave the house in clean condition because they're charging you this fee no matter what. You're not going to get it back. However, if it's a deposit, in this case, you have the opportunity to get that money back if you leave the home in good, clean condition. So that's the difference of those. And then down here we have prorated rent for those few days that were left over in January of $333. That's how this figure is calculated. At the bottom of every page is the opportunity for the tenant to initial the name of the homeowner and the address. And that's going to be the bottom of every single page of this document. Moving on to page 2. There are no additional monies due in this particular, but if there were, they would be mentioned here. The additional fees. In Nevada, it's required that we provide our tenants with a 3-day grace period. In this case, the landlord is providing a 5-day grace period, and the late fees would begin on the 6th day. In this case, they're $100 or 5% of the rent. If you were to, as a tenant, if you were to send a check and it was to be returned or there was a dishonored payment of any kind, an additional charge of $75 will be added. Now, additional rent. What this means is any kind of late fees or utility bills or anything that has to be added to your bill would be considered additional rent for the purposes of the lease. And so they would be due the following month. So anything that is incurred during that month would be due the following month as additional rent. In this case, a security deposit being held by the broker. In this case, that's us. And it's being held in a separate trust account. And also at the bottom here, you'll note that it's checked that the tenant in this particular case is not required to furnish receipts for licensed cleaning services. Sometimes property managers or owners will require that. We decided not to. If you can clean the house to the standard of a professional, you're fine. You don't have to pay someone else to do it. But it has to be the professional standard. We're going to check it and make sure. If it's not, you could still be billed for a professional to come in and follow up behind you. So you might want to hire a professional anyway, and you don't have to provide receipts, but you might want to. Moving on to page 3. When you sign this lease, you're saying, hey, the property's in good condition. I'm taking it as is. It's in good shape. The broker is going to maintain trust accounts and 2 separate accounts. The brokerage maintains an account for regular transactions and a separate account for security deposits. If you were to be evicted, you would be charged an additional $250 for administrative fees. These are the items that are going to be provided to you for access to the property. You're going to get some door keys, mailbox keys. In this case, you're getting a garage transmitter and a 2 gate transmitters, a pool key, and then also 2 community IDs. A lot of times you'll have to get these yourself from the HOA. Sometimes they can be provided by the landlord, depends upon the HOA. You're going to use the home as a residential property. You're not going to be using it to conduct any kind of business, and you're only going to access the livable areas. You're not going to go climbing into the attic or other crawl spaces that you're not supposed to be in. Which reminds me, attics are not a place to store things here in Las Vegas because they get incredibly hot, and whatever you put up there, it's just going to like melt. My wife and I made the mistake of putting some books in our attic when we first moved here. They were like just dried up and turned to dust almost by the time we moved out of that property. Number of occupants. In this case, there's only 2, Mr. and Mrs. If you have children or some other occupants of the property that are not actual tenants, then they would be listed here as well. Guests can remain in the property, but no more in this case than 10 days. This is good news for the tenants. You can tell your guests, hey, listen, you can only stay 10 days because if you stay any more, I got to pay more rent. Why is this important to the landlord? Because the houses are designed for a certain number of occupants, and also they don't really want tenants to be subletting or subleasing any part of the house. That's an important element because we don't know who those temporary people might be, and we can't hold them accountable. Only the tenant would be held accountable. Utilities. This is a divvying of the utilities. This is how they're going to be paid. Anything marked T is for the tenant. Those are usually the consumption-based utilities. In this case, anything marked O, the owner will take care of. And as a tenant, you are responsible to put those utilities in your name. The landlord doesn't want to carry them in their own name and then bill you. They prefer you put them in your own name. Because if you were late, then it was in the owner's name, the owner would be the one that was penalized. And so that's why you have to move everything into your name as a tenant. In this case, the landlord's not going to be carrying any things and billing you later. Sometimes they do. Sometimes sewer and trash are added to your rent in certain leases. We don't do that. We just make it part of the rent. You're not allowed to add phone lines or cable lines to the house without the landlord's written consent. If there's an alarm system there, you're welcome to obtain services to monitor it. If you were to not pay the utility bills at the end of the lease, you could be billed for that later. The landlord will likely come after you for that balance. You need to provide a 0 balance to the landlord when you move out. In some areas, particularly here in Southern Nevada, when you talk about North Las Vegas or Henderson, sometimes the sewer and trash are tied to the water bill and billed by the local municipality. If that's the case, those would be included as a tenant expense. The landlord doesn't want to have to figure out how much they owe separate from that, so those get lumped into your bill if you are in North Las Vegas or Henderson, in our case here. Pest notices. We do have pests here in Southern Nevada. Just want to make you aware of them. Pets. This is an important clause here, clause 18. If you have a pet in the property, in our case, you would be providing an additional security deposit. You also have to provide that your insurance, your renter's insurance, the pet will be noted in that renter's insurance policy and covered. And that policy needs to cover third-party damage. If your pet was to bite somebody, you need to have insurance to cover that, should there be a liability. If there's a pet found in the home that was not accounted for in the lease or subsequently added, then there's a $1,000 fine in this case. And that could be, it's up to the property manager or landlord to decide how much that fine is. In this case, it's $1,000. You're not allowed to have a waterbed or boat, campers, trailers, mobile homes, recreational commercial vehicles, or non-operative vehicles on the property. If there's an exception, it'll be noted here. You can't be working on your car in the driveway. I know in the old days that was never a big deal, but now these days it's a problem. So you can't be working on your car in the driveway. You can't make any alterations to the property without the landlord's written consent. If you were to default, you would lose your security deposit, you would be evicted, and there's additional fees, so just don't default. Don't do that. There's lots of problems for you if you were to default. Your personal information also becomes available to whoever it is the collection agency is that's going to be chasing you for those monies. So you kind of lose some of your privacy as well. If the landlord was to agree to not enforce the terms of one part of this agreement, that doesn't mean that they're not able to enforce the rest of the agreement. If they were to make an exception for you, which they can, I suppose, it doesn't happen very often, but if they were to make an exception, it doesn't mean that they're abandoning all the other terms of the lease. If you were to abandon the property for more than 15 days in this case, that's considered abandonment. The landlord has a right to take over the property, and that's not something you want to do. So if you're going to be leaving the property for an extended period, you need to let the landlord know. Once you're ready to leave, and you know you're ready to leave, you need to give at least 30 days notice prior to the end of the lease. Now, you can't just give notice at any time during the lease. It's only at the end of the lease when you're allowed to give notice. You can give notice as far in advance of that as you like, but it can be no shorter than 30 days. So if your lease is ending January 31st of next year, you need to give the landlord notice by the end of December of this year to say, yes, I don't intend to renew and I'm going to be moving out. You have to give that kind of notice. Otherwise, if you don't give that notice, you could be subject to a 10% increase in your rents, and it becomes on a month-to-month basis. And you don't want to do that. So make sure you let the landlord know your intentions. Now, we usually send out notices well in advance of this, so you have an opportunity to decide whether you want to renew or not. Upon termination, you're going to surrender and vacate it. You're going to remove all your property, return all the property that belongs to the landlord. If there's an emergency, here's some numbers for you to reach out to. In our case, there's a portal. You can enter into the portal right away, but I would also call us if there's a water damage or fire or something bad's happening in the property. Call us right away to let us know, and we'll see if we can't address it immediately. Whenever there's maintenance required in the property, as a tenant, you'll be responsible for, normally in this case, the first $85 of that cost. We call this like a non-frivolity clause. Basically, we don't want you to call us for things that are easily fixable, and this prevents that to a certain extent. But if there's major issues, of course, the landlord would handle the cost. Now, if, however, something is damaged as a result of your misconduct or negligence, you're going to be responsible for the entire amount, not just $85. So make sure you're taking care and make sure you're keeping an eye on things for us. You need to change the filters every month. Change the filters in that HVAC system. That's really important because without changing those filters on a regular basis, you can do damage to the air conditioning system. And in doing damage, so if it was need to be repaired, you could be responsible for those costs. Also, anytime there's broken glass in the property, the tenant's automatically responsible, irregardless of the cause. That's one of the clauses in this lease, and that's standard throughout the valley here. The landlord is, however, responsible for the systems in the house, but responsible for them to make sure that they're maintained. But you are responsible to do the periodic maintenance. You understand? So you need to change those filters. That's really important. In this case, we do have a landscaper who's going to be maintaining the property. Here's the landscaper's contact information. You need to make sure you provide access for that landscaper, and you also need to make sure that the plants are getting watered properly throughout the week. The landscaper might be visiting once a week. They may not. But you're still responsible to see to it that all those plants have enough water to survive and thrive. There's a pool guy here. He'll be maintaining the pool. Again, you have to create access for this pool person to get in there, and you have to make sure that the equipment is running as it needs to run. Don't shut it down. If a pool starts to turn green and it's discovered that it's because the tenant turned off the pumps, the tenant's going to be responsible for cleaning up the pool, and perhaps refilling the pool and all of those things. So don't do that. Make sure you cooperate with these vendors who are coming on property. No smoking in the house, period. End of story. No smoking of any kind in the home. Smoke detectors. Make sure the smoke detectors, if they start beeping, don't just unplug them or take them apart. Go ahead and replace the battery. That's really important. For your safety, it's really important. So make sure. And sometimes, unfortunately, sometimes those batteries fail within a few weeks of your moving in, and I'm sorry about that, but you still have to replace that battery. You need to grant access to the landlord, to the property managers with 24 hours notice. There's periodic inspections conducted every now and then. You need to grant that access, give the landlord access with proper notice. You're allowed to display signs in the yard as long as it's okay by the HOA. You're allowed to display the flag. Again, that's okay. The HOAs. Now, there's governing documents from the HOA. There's CC&Rs. There's rules and regulations. Those will be provided to you along with this lease. You need to abide by them. If you were to break any of those rules or violate any of those CC&Rs or anything of that nature, and a fine was imposed by the HOA, you would be responsible as the tenant. Here's the things that are being left in the property. They need to remain on the property when you move out. They need to be maintained throughout the time that you're there. You become responsible for these items as well. You need to have tenant insurance. You need to cover yourself. The landlord's insurance policy will cover the structure and other various elements outside the property. But for your personal property, you want renter's insurance. It's not that expensive. It's well worth it. Please do get yourself some renter's insurance and then provide us a copy. As a property management company, we like to see a copy of your renter's insurance. We also like to be named as additionally insured on that so that we're notified should it not be continued. Drug-free housing, I think this is pretty obvious. Also, don't put your barbecue too close to the home. I believe it's within 10 feet. Yeah, you don't have it within 10 feet of the property or any overhangs. So put your barbecue in the backyard, put it far away from the property. This is a clarification of whether the house has been freshly painted or touched up recently, and that's for when you move out. That's the standard set upon your move in. When you move out, it'll be checked. Now, an important term to remember upon your move out is normal wear and tear. If there's things in the house that are damaged or not quite what they were when you moved in, but it's as a result of what's considered normal wear and tear, you're not responsible for that. Putting little holes in the wall to hang your pictures, that's okay. That's normal wear and tear. Paint, a little scuff here and there, that's normal wear and tear. However, if somebody backed a dresser into a wall and put a big dent in the wall, that's not normal wear and tear. So there is a standard met as to what would be applied to your security deposit. Keep that in mind as you're moving out, and look for those things. And when you move in, make sure you take good documentation, move-in photos of when you moved in, and then also do them when you moved out so that you can verify and validate what, if anything, is charged against your security deposit. The landlord will be doing the same thing. You agree to transfer the utilities within 3 days. If you decide to change the locks on the property, which is your right, you still need to provide a copy of those keys to the property manager or landlord. That's important. As a property manager, I need to be able to have access to the property for emergencies. You're allowed to conduct a risk assessment and any type of inspection you like for the property. You can display the flag. We already talked about that. You can display political signs as long as it's okay with the HOA. Don't store any dangerous materials on the property. Any changes to this agreement must be in writing. What's said doesn't count. What's in writing counts. And if there is an addendum to this lease, the addendum would supersede the lease. In other words, in the addendum, they say, hey, the tenant is now responsible for the landscaping. The landlord will no longer be providing landscaping. Now that supersedes the original lease. It's an addendum. It's after the fact. That would be the terms. That adjustment would be valid. But it has to be in writing and signed by both parties, agreed to by both parties. If there is any kind of legal or court action, the loser is going to pay everybody's attorney's fees. This is under Nevada law. Nothing shall be construed of waiving your rights. The law would supersede the lease always. If part of this contract was indeed deemed invalid, it would invalidate the whole thing. A single violation could be determined as a material breach. So read this, know this carefully. Whenever there's a conflict between tenants and landlords, or tenants and us, or us and landlords, I always look right to the lease. This is the governing document that I look to. By signing this, you're agreeing to the terms. Here's a disclosure that the landlord, Mrs. Landlord, is actually a licensee here in the state of Nevada. Here are the parties. The Tommy Chong's representing the tenants. I am representing the landlords in this case. Again, the bottom of every page, you're going to be initialing as a tenant. There is a military provision in this lease agreement. If you are military and you're given orders to be moving, you can give the landlord 30 days notice, but you need to provide those orders, and then the landlord will have to let you out of the lease. There would be no choice in the matter. If the landlord was to be foreclosed upon, it's really important to note this. You need to continue to pay rent, but know this, that the tenants shall honor all the conditions of the current lease agreement, but also the new owner of the property must honor the lease agreement. There's a saying in real estate that the lease runs with the land. If the home is sold or foreclosed upon, the people who now own it still have to honor your lease. They can't throw you out, but you have to make your rent payments. There's a couple of addendums attached to this. There's HOA rules and regulations, and then we have something we call a tenant handbook we would hand you as well and provide that to you. It kind of simplifies the terms of the lease a little bit. Additional terms and conditions on this page, and then signatures on this page, and I believe that's it. So that's our residential lease agreement. Thanks for paying attention. I hope this was helpful. I hope you found this video helpful. Please feel free to review our other videos at www.lvrrealestateradio.com. And once again, thank you for taking the time to learn about this document. And if you have any questions, just call or text me at 702-203-1165.